Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning.
Good morning and a happy Tuesday, gentlemen.
It's a Tuesday. For sure it is.
It is.
Is it a happy Tuesday, though?
I mean,
It's been a busy
if
month.
If I go that high pitch, Tommy, it's got to be a happy Tuesday.
It's true.
But yes, I think as we enter the final stretches of the year, I think all of us are a little tired. It gets busy.
I'm tired of all this political news. That's what I'm tired of. Just get the news over with in the U.S.
We're not even talking about that. We're not even talking about it.
I'm just saying, I'm done with it. I just want to hear nothing less of it. Too much.
I'm not feeling a happy Tuesday, guys.
No?
Yeah, Tommy's having rough days these days.
Tommy, do we need to open the therapy session?
Yeah. Well, let's go through what we're talking about today, and then I can.
Main topic, and then Tommy's going to have a therapy session. All right, let's go. So main topic for today is we're going to talk about the Medallion architecture. Let's go kind of a little bit over what it is for those of you who don't understand it or haven't heard about it before. And then let's just talk about its viability and is it relevant inside the context of Fabric? Now that we have Fabric, does the Medallion architecture still hold true? Should we still be using it? Are there other patterns we should be looking at? So we'll just kind of discuss where we think things land, and we'll go from there. That's our main topic. But before we get there, Tommy, go ahead, give us some of your news and announcements this morning.
I'm not happy, guys, and it's been a tough few days. Our last episode, we talked about the joy of baseball and the World Series starting. And for some of you may know this, I happen to be a rather fanatic towards the New York Yankees. Always have been.
Yep.
Unfortunately, always will be.
I thought you were going to say the Mets.
No. Every single background, every single computer, and the Yankee pinstripes there, and every baseball back there is a Yankee thing. You can see.
You're invested. It's invested.
I'm invested, and right now, the hope I had last Thursday, the World Series was about to start. We've lost the last three, and not just lost them, but game one, we were winning up until with 2 outs to go in the bottom of the ninth. And a likable guy in the Dodgers, he's actually a likable guy, hit a grand slam to walk off the game. Guys, I don't know if you've ever had someone break up with you, but if you know that night when someone either said no, and you wake up and go, did that happen? Was that real? Oh, shoot, it was. That was me Friday night, Saturday morning. Let me put it in perspective. Our plumbing broke Friday night. No water. We couldn't take showers. I had to take my son to Wendy's to go to the bathroom. And by far the worst thing of this was the dang Yankees losing 3 games. and I'm not even acting here. I've questioned things. I've had to apologize to my wife because I'm like, I didn't think this was going to affect me. I asked someone who's very close to me. I'm like, how much should one care about sports? I've been questioning things. And why do I care about laundry? All sports is I'm rooting for my laundry to beat your laundry. There's nothing else. It doesn't affect my kids going to college or if I get a new client or not. It's a dumb thing. Sports are dumb. And I don't know why I care.
I don't follow them.
Don't. It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
I couldn't tell you who's winning or losing right now. It just doesn't matter to me.
I've been waking up just in a foul mood, just like, dang, like randomly in the day, just like slapping my just head going, just upset and sad and angry.
So I have the same feeling. The fact that I can't use schemas in a semantic model.
I don't know. As much as I can relate, I don't think it compares in this one.
So, I don't know. I'm pretty distraught about this one. I'm also having, Tommy, your same take that emotion that you have in that feeling there. Okay. Now think about data flows without incremental refresh. Think about data flows Gen 2 not being able to go into GitHub. I care about
this stuff too. I care too much. That's what I care
too much. That's exactly right. We care too much. We want it to be a great product.
This is the example for you, Mike. Imagine you have been building from the basement up a 3-story Lego masterpiece. And you're like, all I have to do is this last story, put the hand on, and it's going to be good. And then every night it just begins to crumble a little and crumble. And there's nothing you can do.
Nothing I build in Legos crumbles, but that's okay. I mean, that's an amateur builder right there.
But again, you actually have control over that. I have no control and I'm helpless. And Seth, I know you follow the Packers, but this is dumb. Like, why is sports such a big thing? My wife says entertainment. It's not. I'm not entertained by any of this.
I can also tell that your wife is very much annoyed with your behavior over the last couple of days, just
She's a
because of
saint.
because you have been just stomping around the house for no apparent
Yeah.
reason.
I had to apologize to the kids because I was playing
Short with everyone.
My son, I told him don't throw it back to me. He threw it back and I chucked it and I said, go get it. And I'm like, what am I doing? Perspective. I appreciate you guys. I love Power BI. And I was just like, why are the things I care? Like, why are the things I like? I just care too deeply about. That's
because you're Italian. That's what it is.
I don't know what it is.
It's the Italian.
Guys, sports are dumb. It's a dumb thing.
Take a breath, Tommy.
Got it. You can handle this.
Slowly draw in for 7 seconds. Hold and release.
Oh!
It's like or the old Seinfeld episode, Serenity Now.
Serenity Now. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Awesome.
Well,
Tommy, I'm sorry to hear that your team's not doing well and it's causing pain, but these things too shall pass.
Well, if you're listening, I have a lot more time soon for Power BI and Microsoft Fabric, so
there we go. Stay tuned. A lot more.
Nothing to do at night.
A lot more training YouTube sessions coming because Tommy's gonna have a whole bunch of free time.
Fill it with Power BI.
Awesome. A couple other news articles here. I just want to point out something. I just did a recent YouTube video with Estera Kott with the new native execution engine, and I think announced yesterday on the Microsoft blog was a article talking exactly about the native execution engine is now available. You can go try it now in public preview, and the best part is no additional cost. Other tools, Databricks out there is charging you extra money for this thing called Photon. It costs you more to run it. Microsoft is giving you a speedier engine, and you look at some of the statistics. I think they have some graphs in here about how much faster it is. It's substantially faster than everything else, and you can use it for no additional cost. So you get stuff done faster, doesn't cost you more, and it seems amazing. So I really love it. Super good article. Go check it out. Go read the documentation. It's very easy to turn on. With one line of code, you can do a bunch of really cool things. So definitely go check out the blog article about that one. I'll put that in the chat window. Highly recommended. It is awesome. So I'll definitely drop that link in there for you so you can go check that out.
I have tested that, and it is a significant difference with speed. It's very impressive. To your point,
you have played with it a little bit. All right, good.
Yeah, I was like, hey, actually, it's like we're not joking around here.
No, they're not. I mean, I'm just, and it's neat because Microsoft is still using the normal Spark engine, but it's also built on a number of other community-based tools, Gluten being one of them. But so there's other. It's not like Microsoft's building this proprietary thing, but there's a Velox and I think Gluten are the other two tools.
I'm sorry. There's actually a tool called Gluten.
I believe it's an open source library that they're using. I thought it was Gluten.
For somebody who is gluten
Seth hates the word gluten. Yes,
that is hilarious.
I think it's it's Apache Gluten, and then it's Velox. So there's the two projects that they're kind of working on. So Gluten and Velox.
I can use and consume gluten in my life. It's just in technology.
It's the Apache gluten you're not allergic to.
You should just choose all the allergic foods. Apache peanut.
That's great.
So, anyways, very, very cool article. Definitely go check out the documentation. It's in the chat window as well. So you definitely want to read about this. Again, if you use Spark, if you're using notebooks at all, this is Who Are You. Definitely check it out. See if your workloads run on it. And if you're not doing anything super crazy complex with your Spark engine, it will just work. You can just use your existing code today, and it will just run faster. I mean, how great is that? This is like a hidden secret that we're jumping into. So anyways, very, very, very cool items here. And I'm extremely pleased to have that part of our library now. Okay, one other random thing. I'm going to just point out one thing here. It feels like something has happened in Power BI Desktop. I don't know. It just recently occurred to me. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I was in Power BI Desktop. I was making some changes to measures and trying to calculate different things on a visual. And for whatever reason, I could not get the visual to render things. It would not update itself. For whatever reason, I was having issues with like changing a measure, and then I was bringing data in, and the data was just returning blank values for whatever reason. Only when I went to a different page and came back the visual just kind of like magically refreshed itself and started working. I don't know what I did, but it feels like I'm getting some very weird bug related things that are just kind of in styling or changing the properties of a visual, and they're not quite
Are you in
adhering to
dark
it.
mode?
That's a good question. I'm not in dark
Because
mode. I was in there's so there's
Mhm.
default, there's dark mode, and there's light mode. So I was in
System,
light
dark,
mode,
Okay,
which
so
I think is not standard, right?
this is okay. It's funny
And you were in dark mode when this maybe occurred,
because
right?
I just, based on our conversation last week, dark mode was one of those
Sure.
things I just hadn't gotten around to enabling. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna go make after our features conversation. I was like, I'm gonna go check to make sure I have them all on or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, I'll apply dark mode. Ever since then, I've got I haven't locked it into a specific set, right? Of like, wow, that weirdness right there, like you described. I thought it was like configuration of colors, but I also, now that you're saying this, could have been like measures as well in the table. Stuff just wasn't working when I like
Yeah.
copy pasted, create a new
Yes.
visual. The other thing that 100% was not was filters.
Filters.
If I selected a different filter to not basic dropdown, all of the menu dropdowns for like conditions, right, is blank, is not blank. All
Sure.
that was
Yep.
just a white box. Just a white box. And I was thinking like, well, maybe it's just my graphics card on my machine.
You know you've been programmed when you think it's you or your machine. It's like
Right.
the thing that's broken.
It's interesting you experience. I wonder if I could go back to default if all my problems go away.
I would try that.
Theme? Are you using a custom theme? Because I've had a very similar, somewhat of a similar issue where
you're probably using the theme generator from Power BI Tips, Tommy. That's probably what broke it.
This is pre-theme. Everything worked, but don't you dare copy and paste the visual like the Power BI. Okay, interesting.
Okay, so I also see in the chat window, Eric is also saying that he's also experienced some of this weird, something's not quite working in dark mode, and as well. So
he's not using dark mode, so it's just maybe,
but not using dark mode. So maybe it's not that, but I'm not sure.
Current version.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway,
not sure.
There's some wonkiness going on.
There is. Okay, so that being said, though, just be aware there's some weird things going on. We'll kind of keep our ears to the ground, see if we can hear anything. If anyone in the community is having other weird issues with that, and I'm not sure, there's like default mode, which I think is like how the coloring is supposed to work in Power BI. And then I think there's light mode, and then there's dark mode. So maybe I was on light mode when I saw the issue. I'm not sure if that's any effect there or what else. I'll keep my ears to the ground, and I do like being in dark mode. I've been building a lot in dark mode recently, so I'm going to continue playing around with dark mode because I think it's great.
The only thing I have seen come out of the team since dark mode is all of a sudden like a bunch of dark themes, and I'm like, no.
Yeah,
like there is
Didn't
no.
I call it? I called this.
I said, because you have all the dark right around
everything.
It's like,
yes,
I want to make everything dark.
Yes, and it's kind of, it's subtly changing how you build the report itself, because the report itself is like you have all this dark themed stuff around you. The white on the dark is going to just make you naturally try and push towards a darker mode. So I think using dark mode is going to push people to build darker themed things at some point.
I predict there's going to be a toggle soon.
Maybe we need an automatic. Every report has to come out in light and dark mode.
Yeah.
Sounds like
I want to do my Power Query in dark. I want to do my modeling in dark. I want to do my DAX in dark. But once we get to the report, I want that to be light.
Oh, now you're adding some really requirements. So the report portion of the report, or the report portion should be in light mode. Well, actually, it's also silly that you have to switch between light and dark modes inside the settings and the options. Yeah. I mean, it's not bad. But it would. I'm thinking to your point there, Tommy. It should probably be a bit more visible because if you're in the report side, it kind of makes sense to make it more light mode.
I'm nitpicking here because I have to click on options and setting twice to get to options and settings.
Not anymore.
No, are you sure?
Not anymore. Yeah, there's
settings, and I still get the.
You do if you go through the file menu.
Yeah.
Have you found the gear icon in the bottom right hand? Yeah. Here's a good thing. Let's put all icons wherever we want, all around everything that is in Power BI. So like, there's icons on the left nav. There's a right nav. There's the top header bar. And by the way, the bottom right hand corner has the gear, and now that's just for all the settings. Let's just hide everything wherever we can.
And yet I don't have my quick access toolbar
And we still deleted quick
Come
access
on.
toolbar. Come
Come
on.
on. The best article I've read to date on Power BI was by Mike Carlo before I knew Mike Carlo about setting up your custom access.
Dude, I'm telling you.
That was
Control 1, Control 2,
Alt
center
one,
and align all the visuals.
yeah.
That was like,
Oh
that was
my
hot.
gosh.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Well,
Bring it back.
you're never going to get it. So, not a problem. They've said that no one uses that feature. Apparently, it was only used by one user, and it was used by me. Two users, me and Tommy, were the only ones using that quick access toolbar in that fashion. It's not. I don't think it's coming back ever.
Dang.
All right, that's okay. We'll fix all these little edge case things with our theme generator, our wireframing. We'll do it in wireframing. Yeah. We'll make it appropriate over there. Speaking of which, I'll also point out too. I just recently released 2 new wireframe designs, which I'll try and go get the links for them and put them also in the chat window. I just found some interesting people building good-looking reports on the internet, copied their designs, threw down some of our own designs, and kind of added some style to them, dropped in a couple more visuals. So we've got one called Tabs and one called Teacher. So there's actually 2 new themes out there. We are quickly becoming, I think, the largest collection of styled, template reports inside the theme generator. And I think we need to rebrand a bit. We need to be calling ourselves like the template or, generator. We're doing more than just theming these days. So anyways, I just want to call those out. I'll put the links in the chat window as well. If you want to go check out those themes or templates and go download them, they're out and available. Okay, we've been doing a lot of intro. This is a long intro for today, I feel like. But it's been fun. It's been good talking. Let's jump into our main topic today. So main topic today, let's talk about the Medallion architecture. Where did this come from? And should we be building this thing inside Fabric? What does it look like in the Fabric world of things? Tommy, give us a little bit of introduction around what is the Medallion architecture. Just let's explain what it is, and then we can go into a little bit. How do we integrate it with Fabric or not?
I feel like you're doing an injustice because this is you and Seth, man, for years. So as much as I would love to explain it, I want you to
That's good. All right.
Yeah, just because honestly,
like
this is your guys' baby.
All right, punt. Seth, give us a quick introduction
Mike,
as to
Mike,
the.
Bring it around for
All
us.
right, I'll bring it around. All right, I don't want to talk the whole time.
I can do.
Okay, go ahead, Seth. Kick us off.
So I think what we're talking about today, and you can clarify for me, right, is bringing Medallion architecture. Do we bring the same thing into Fabric, right? And I think some of the points you're interweaving in here, Tommy, relate to how is the Medallion architecture different than a traditional warehouse architecture?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. Where did like the Medallion architecture essentially came from more of the data lake realm, right? Big
Delta
data,
Lake.
Delta Lake.
Yep.
And I think there's going to be nuance here. I don't know. So Mike, pick up because I know you've worked in both specifically,
Mm-hmm.
but in the warehouse realm, essentially it's much more, from my experience, it's structured. Right. I have staging, I have a cleansing, I have, and it's structured because you are working within, fully flattened tables, right? It's tables of data, joins, structure, like building out the different stages, cleaning things, building out your facts, dimensions, slowly changing dimensions. Like there's a process. And once you set up that process, you follow it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the Medallion architecture or lakes, you could be ingesting any type or structure of data, right? So your raw layer is consuming from, I think, a wide variety of different sources, and how, especially even in Databricks, you create your Delta tables, they can be structured in such a way that I only have 10 columns, but there's nested structures underneath those columns that I then can extrapolate, right? So for my, bronze layer, is just capturing incremental history, right, of those changed objects. In my silver, I can grab the most recent, and I think it's designed not to do a ton of heavy lifting in terms of data transformation, but it's give me flatten out what is going to be the most useful object to the business to then scale, and then gold is where you're applying most of your business logic. And in my experience, maybe the nuance here that I'm just not like speaking directly to is there's less structure of this kind of, it's more freeform to me because it's not as locked in by creating objects that have keys and relationships between the tables, and then you're building out on that. It's more free form. This is the flow, which is also a byproduct of like it being challenging, not being able to like navigate or understand how all those objects tie together. If you're still in Hive, Unity Catalog helps that out. Fabric, different world. But ultimately, like allows you to create this, ecosystem that you can use reporting and analytics on directly, have that nugget of business knowledge, and then build out further if you needed to for your facts and dimensions. That's kind of how I think about it.
And I'm going to pull back. I think that's exactly everything you're saying is spot on. I'm going to put just maybe a couple of my observations. Again, I think, Seth, you came from a much more database-centric world of the space.
Yeah.
Like you were SQL Server, you were DBA. I was not that as much. I was definitely much more of the Excel builder, business user, analyst kind of things. And that's kind of my approach to this. And I kind of came in with more of like the data science approach. When I was getting my master's in data science, I had to go spin up my own Hadoop and MapReduce and all these other kind of crazy things that like no longer I need them anymore. But it gave me an understanding of like how the architecture works. So, I mean, I feel like the main is me as like kind of an outsider to the SQL DBA world. It feels a lot like, it feels very similar, but it also felt like a lot of the SQL world, and I think SQL is kind of, the SQL and data warehousing world has slightly changed in lieu of what's happening with lakehouses and the Medallion architecture. Anyways, it's already shifting. But that being said, I felt like SQL was more of like a row level context. You're storing rows of data. You access data at row level information. You put indexes on them to make sure you can skip a number of rows to get down to the data you want. I mean, I felt like SQL felt very row-based informational. And then what I felt we had with Medallion, it was we're using this new architecture. Now, SQL and data warehousing had this ACID transactions. That was the main pull for why the data warehouse. You can guarantee that you're not overwriting other people's data. The ACID transaction experience works well in that data warehousing. The challenge was when we went to big data, there was no structure like this. There was no equivalent for ACID transactions. And then we show up with Delta Lake, and the Delta Lake is really this format or structure. And this, I think, was kind of born out of the Databricks community. It kind of owns that definition. It's definitely an open source project. It's there, but Databricks seemed to be one of the leading companies that was kind of pushing this Delta Lake experience. And I think from this, we kind of started saying, okay, how do we start shaping this data? And I think we have very similar aspects in data warehousing. There's a staging table, you land data in the staging table, and then you say, okay, from the staging information, do I insert or update those records inside the actual SQL final tables? So I feel like in SQL, I had a lot of this comparison of like staging, final table. That felt like a lot of what we were doing. And then maybe from final tables, you would do some additional transformations to make additional tables inside SQL. My opinion here is SQL was always limited by, you don't want a lot of extra data living around the data warehouse. You're trying to be as efficient as you could. So creating conform dimensions, having proper fact tables like star schema, that was an efficient way to use SQL. When we went over to the lakehouse, the storage costs were extremely cheap. And so how we were thinking about creating tables of data slightly changed. I mean, because in Delta tables, I don't need to go insert or update a bunch of individual rows. I could just drop a bunch of tables data or drop a bunch of partitions, stop reading them, and just write new files. It was faster to not delete or update or insert. It was actually faster just to like ignore and then write down new records that the Delta table would just update itself to. So my opinion here is, I think you hit it spot on. The Delta Lake architecture, the Medallion architecture is store raw data in bronze, deduplicate, filter, clean those topical pieces of information in silver, and then join them or merge them together, apply business logic in the gold layer to output the data. And I think some people get hung up that like, oh, I have one table in bronze and one table in silver and one table in gold. That's not necessarily true. You can have many different tables in any of these areas of the lake. It's just semantics. It doesn't really matter what you're doing with it. I mean, it's kind of just mentally how you're enriching the data and getting it closer to, you're going from an operational system, online transactional processing, OLTP, to LLAP. Is that what this is? I don't remember. I always get the terms mixed up there. But you're going from something that is transactional in nature to something that is reporting, and it's columnar storage. So I think that's a lot of what we're doing here. And there hasn't been a single project I've ever done where there hasn't been some level of transformations required to the data, period. And that's where I think the Delta Lake shines.
And I think that's context for, I think, our conversation today. And I firmly believe a conversation we're going to continue to have. This actually sparked from a message from someone named Simon Spotty, where the first sentence is, the Medallion architecture gets a lot of hype. And it's like, okay, we know that when technology changes, a lot of times process changes too. Data, the Medallion architecture actually was created by Databricks.
Yep.
So the origin of this was actually a Databricks creation, again, when the technology made sense. And I personally want to have the conversation too, where I'm finding more and more where does the Medallion architecture in its current form make complete sense with Fabric, or is it going to evolve where the gold standard is? Because I think we could all agree where the baseline, the gold standard of how you're going to do data engineering or data ingestion is really the Medallion architecture in its current form.
So,
well, more or less.
I want to separate two things here, right?
Okay.
One is in simplified terms, right? Whether we talk about the original processing of data into a data warehouse or the processing of data now through a Medallion architecture, like the simplified version of that is like on a high level, both of these things are transforming data to make it usable.
Yeah.
Right. And even if you follow a process, there's going to be outliers. There's going to be different ways organizations have to plug into different things. At the end of the day, you're going to have the same types of data in those systems. I think what's significantly different in the two methods. So like, I think that is important to separate because and not muddle into like, yeah, we're talking about ETL, ELT, whatever, right? We're transforming, we're extracting, we're transforming, we're sourcing data and shaping it and to make it useful for analytics and reporting. I think the significant difference is when you start to analyze and look at the brass tacks of how or where these methodologies and architectures were implemented, they were on completely different structured systems, right? So it's the objects themselves and the capabilities that I think push into, like into this other stream of, we're talking about the Medallion architecture, and with that comes these other capabilities that are not present in just a warehouse build, right? Because to Mike's point, we're in tables, we're doing row by row kind of activities or actions, whereas you may not be bound by those same things in a Medallion architecture because of the systems that you're applying those to. And I think that to me is the important distinction.
I really like that too. And one other quick note here: you ask a lot of Power BI pros, professionals who have really only worked in Power BI, and they're going to go ETL. Isn't that just Power Query, man? And for a lot of organizations, they kind of had to make do if they didn't work with the data engineering team. It was Power Query in Power BI Desktop, not Data Flow, but it was Power BI Desktop. So, and I'm seeing I'm seeing a lot of this because I'm having conversations with a few clients who, a year ago, they asked me about, or maybe a year and a half ago, about a lake house, or can we do that? And their maturity was like, okay, that means they're gonna have to spin up an Azure resource. It's gonna be this process. They don't have that skill. They didn't, the talent there.
But or do they want to spend the time to learn all that stuff because they got to get going? Like we got to move faster. But now, Fabric has made it way easier for us to integrate these things.
So data ingestion's never been easier. And let me kind of just start. We can start there, I guess, from a question point of view. Your experience with Fabric right now, and especially your experience with the Medallion architecture in the current form, do you see that the traditional patterns still make 100% sense?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't think there's any, in my mind, there's no question that the Medallion architecture should be used today inside Fabric. Where I think I question things right now are, am I able to use all the new features that I need inside Fabric to make it easy for me to work with the Medallion architecture? The answer right now to me is no, right? So when we think about a Medallion architecture, we're thinking about different areas or topics of information. Inside our lakehouse, we have schemas, right? So this is something that's new that's been released. A lakehouse can have a schema. The schema potentially could hold the bronze, the silver, and the gold data inside a single lakehouse. Today, you can't get a lakehouse. And again, maybe they're working on the feature. I don't know when it will get here. I'm guessing eventually. But today, a semantic model pointed at a direct lake lakehouse, right? If you're doing direct lake to those things, you can't pick the schema you want, and those tables will not show up in the semantic model. The schemas don't work with semantic models today currently. And so you're stuck with using a SQL Analytics warehouse or SQL Analytics, or using the lakehouse directly to store things in schemas. You can use a notebook. The notebooks can talk to the schemas, can figure out, okay, I have a schema. And what a schema is, it's another naming convention, right? So you have, when you're accessing data, select star from, and then instead of just having the lakehouse name and the table name, it's now lakehouse name, schema name, silver or bronze, and then the table name. So it's like a 3-part naming convention. This is very similar to what Databricks does today. Same kind of concept. It's a 3-part naming schema, so it knows where to go get those tables from. So in my opinion, we're a little bit limited. We're still playing catch up, in my opinion, on what the downstream tools that consume the Medallion architecture. Today, if you're going to build a Medallion architecture, I'm recommending build 3 separate lakehouses. One lakehouse for bronze, one lakehouse for silver, and one lakehouse for gold. And then you move the data into those lakehouses. In the future, hopefully we get schemas, and then maybe my recommendation will change to, okay, well, we're going to have bronze and silver in the same lakehouse, and then we'll put the gold tables in a separate lakehouse, because I want to, again, share the lakehouse item with external users. Another one here that's a kind of a weakness, in my opinion, is one security that was talked about eons ago. I don't know, whatever the enhanced security, right? It's not like there isn't security now. There's going to be additional security down to the table level and maybe even to the column level. I don't really know. But if you think about that too, if I can have table level security, then I don't need 2 different lakehouses. I can have one where all the tables exist, and then I give permissions down to the schema, down to the tables inside those schemas, and it just kind of works. It just kind of happens, right? So to me, it's more of like they're still working on the features to make this really smooth and an experience that's just easy to do. Right now, we're just building additional artifacts that we may or may not need in the future. Is that making sense what I'm saying there? Like what I'm describing?
So that makes a perfect sense from a best practice point of view. And unlike the New York Yankees, I'm going to push back here. And because I think for the first time,
we're going to try and hit a home run.
We're actually going to hit the ball here.
We're going to swing at it. Okay, take a swing and hope you don't miss, Tommy. Let's go.
Because our MVP. Anyway, that's another thing. So everything you said first, I want to say I agree with. From a best practice, from the ideal standard, absolutely. But I think what we have with Microsoft Fabric, and I think what we're going to see a lot more frequent than best practice, is we actually have a scale now of best practice. And on the other side of that scale is quick access, because the ability to create the lakehouse without any near skill needed or the practice needed. Like, right, if you wanted a lakehouse before, you had to have the Azure subscription. You had to have these, bells and whistles already created.
Totally agree with you.
So now you're going to tell an organization, or they're going to do it themselves. I don't think it's going to be the consultant coming in, but it's going to be, hey, we can get this data right now in some form or some capacity. And I think that barrier to entry, or rather the lack of barrier to entry, that whatever the means, the quickest means to an end, we're going to see a lot more of that quick access, and it may not be in the best form, or it's going to be some convoluted way.
Well, I do think that's a very good point, because whether or not the Medallion architecture was designed to not create the swamp, right? Because that was like when lakes were out there, right? It instantly like there was this whole like, well, you can create a swamp pretty quickly, and what that means is you're creating a bunch of data, but nobody knows how to use it, right? And you do bring up a good point, because I think the Medallion architecture is the framework that everybody who's building in those systems should be trying to align to, even if you don't get it completely, right? Like, it's not hard to be like, okay, when you ingest, here's this historical slice, here's where you would like pick your current. If you don't have a historical, here's where you put your current, and then you're going to apply your business logic, and this is that gold layer, like this framework is really a naming structure. And I think to Mike's point, it works really well when you have a schema, because you can label things in that schema. I'm in raw, right? In the schema, I'm in silver with the schema. But it's not necessary, because even before schemas and Databricks, whatever, you could still, well, you could still do things in a hacky way, right? Like with proper naming conventions, as you can navigate and understand where, or I should say, you should at minimum have naming standards to allow teams to understand how to interact with the data and where they are when they are, right? My naming schema should absolutely align to bronze. My naming schema should absolutely align to a silver layer. My naming schema should absolutely align to a gold standard, right? Whether or not all your data that comes into this ecosystem flows through each one of those levels, maybe it doesn't. Right? Sometimes it comes in silver. You may pull directly from a source, a SQL table or something that you're pulling up into your realm, and it's going to go in the gold layer, right? Because it's fully vetted, certified, whatever the case may be. Like, there's a bunch of nuance, but if somebody is trying to find something in the system, that is where that framework is absolutely pivotal, because if you don't have that, oh my gosh, right? The only people that know are those that are either like the developers themselves, or the only reason you would know is because somebody is meticulously keeping up with documentation where a different named object, right? This is the rabbit trail of what you're looking for. And you would look across those tables and be like, I would never have been able to find that on my own. And that's something I reinforce with my team all the time. If one, as teams, you have to build in such a nature that you're building for everybody, right? And what that means is all I should have to do is say, hey, I need us to go triage this problem. It's in this table. And that's all they would need. Because if they would start at the front and be able to innately know that, of course, the table name is this. If I want to traverse the, backwards to the raw layer, I don't need to ask somebody what the table name should be. It's just, this is how we've set up the structure of everything, so it's discoverable, right? And I think that's where you get both the benefits of a medallion architecture in the form of the data, but also in the structure and framework that allows you to understand how this ecosystem is working, because you don't have all of these checks and balances and keys and foreign keys that you would in a warehouse, where it's all knit together, and I can look at the table and understand what the relationships of that table are just by looking at the extraneous links between them.
And that background, you're coming in where the experts coming in with the creation of this, and that's not where I foresee the change here, or I think where I'm coming from. If you're coming in as the consultant or the expert, such as yourself, internally creating this, the ideal is you're going to do in Fabric a medallion architecture, because again, it's the North Star here. But I foresee, or I predict that for consultants like myself and Mike, for internally for experts like Seth, where the change I think in the model is going to be, or the structure is, a lot of organizations are not going to adhere to that, and they're going to have much more in Fabric a swamp. Where do you come in then and say, no, we're going to change all these lake houses and all these artifacts in Fabric, and we're going to change them all to medallion architecture? To me, this is where I think there's going to be a diversion, where it's going to be too difficult to try to go in where business users, not just data engineers, because again, we're not playing in the playground of just data engineers. It's going to be business users, Power BI users, and your data scientists all playing Fabric, creating their own process. To me, that's where I think there's going to be the pivot or the improv of what type of models and what type of schema is going to be created. If anything, the skill I think as a consultant, and the skill of the expert here is not so much in the technical skill anymore, or as much as one of the things we've talked about, where this conceptual design, where we're going to have to go in and look at a current structure in Fabric with multiple workspaces and all this crossover and overlap, and having to conceptually think about how do we actually, in a sense, either migrate this or create this so business users can use it and that the data engineers can use it at the same time.
So I'm going to also put some. I like what you're saying there, Tommy, and I think you're right. I think this is also a data culture perspective on this a little bit as well. So when I think about companies that I've worked with, some companies come in, guns a-blazing. Let's just go. Let's just make stuff. Let's make it happen. We'll figure it out as we go. Like they're coming in hot. They're going to make what they need to make, and they're going to solve business problems. And to your point, and I think those organizations, it'll be a bit more disorganized. Things will get created. We won't be adhering to kind of like standards and best practices. We'll just kind of make tables. I think that's okay to some degree. And again, I'm going to always lean back on like I always feel like I keep talking about certified data or not certified data, right? If something is certified, we should spend some time on it. We should think about how it comes in, what the data, how do we transform the data, what's loading, all those kind of things. I also think there's this other organizations come in with a little bit more consideration or considerate towards their data culture. There's probably a smaller team. There's people at the top that are asking a specific design from a certain team and say, look, you need to figure out what is the certified data that we're going to bring in, use the lakehouse architecture or get it into Fabric. We're going to have to learn how to do that. And some organizations come in and say, look, we are a bigger organization. We're going to have process around this. We want this to be a maintainable long-term solution. And so they bring on members, experts, consultants who have done this or have built similar architectures like this before. And I think this is a lot of what I see right now. And this is maybe I'm pulling back a weird concept here is the thing that, to me that's changed a lot of things here is up until this point, we've had a SQL server that kind of had storage and compute all linked into one thing, one item. Now we are in Fabric, and now we have this concept of the storage is now separate from the compute, which I think is this, to me, if I stand back and take really big picture look at this, that is the story here. That's what's happening. I have data flows that can write to the one lake. I have data flows that can write to a SQL server. I have data flows that can write to all these different places. Notebooks can pick up data and move it around all these different places. We now have a data warehouse, which is a SQL engine that can read things from the lakehouse, do transforms on it, and put data back down into the lakehouse. So when I look at all these different compute engines that can now touch and talk to and interact with the lakehouse, to me, it opens the world up here for a lot more opportunity. And now the conversation is, do we need to build a SQL data warehouse or the data warehouse in Fabric, or are we building a lakehouse in Fabric? So I think the decisions are slightly different now. But if we're building the data warehouse in Fabric versus the lakehouse, what are the implications of that? Why would I go one direction or the other? Microsoft has provided some guidance around those things. And to be clear, the data warehouse is the old version of SQL Analytics data warehouse from Synapse, which is like this massive parallel processing compute engine on SQL. It can then talk to and read things directly to and from the lake. Like very incredible things here. So I really like where they're going with this one. And we have, and I think to our conversation here is, I don't think the Medallion architecture is out of place in Fabric. I think it is, it's found its home. I think it makes a lot of sense here. It's just a methodology. It's not a hard standard. Mm-hmm. Some people in the chat here were talking about, hey, it's just kind of a methodology. It's just multiple layers in the lakehouse. It's helping you like logically know where to go for what data's, when things break, where to go. It's a logical organization of things.
Yeah, I think Tommy's got a good point though, Mike. Right? Like, so we can establish that yes, right. Medallion architecture makes a ton of sense in Fabric, or organize things in that way.
Yes.
But do the teams that are building things have experience building things in the data in that Medallion architecture?
And this is where I would argue not all of them are, and some are just winging it. Others are asking for help to build it.
So I think what you'll likely encounter a lot in the future is dependent on how an organization is rolling out Fabric, right? If you're assigning permissions or to a business unit or a domain and they're just going at it, do they have at minimum the starting material, right? This would be one of those things. Starting material. Here is how you want to shape your data. the gold is what you're going to be sharing between teams, right? Making available to the organization. How you get there, we recommend you use this approach as a framework for how you go to approach your data ingestion. If it's the same team, you don't have an issue. But if it's the Wild West, I do think that part of issues that whether consultants or organizations have to face at some point in time is identifying and organizing somebody's landscape, right? Because are they mashing together raw and silver, or potentially like doing everything and you just have a mega table and the only thing that they're doing is trying to traverse the historical records that are coming in, right? Like because there is they don't know how you would separate things out, or maybe there's a silver, there is no silver. There's just when you go current, all the business logic's applied and they're running the problem. Like bare minimum, I think that conversation is going to start right off the bat when the different groups within an organization need to interact with each other. And they're saying, where do I get this data? And it's like, where's your gold layer? And the team goes, what do you mean? What's the consumable layer for me? And I think that's where potentially refactoring of and separating out some of those tables is probably going to happen, because there's a reason that it makes sense that you follow this framework so that the systems work really well. The queries perform really well. So you don't have to like wade through all of history, right? When you're querying for whatever the latest record is or whatever the case may be. And that's where I see it happening is the more you can project some of the, I guess, very data engineering centric themes that will guide how domains generate data in their own ecosystem, I think is really important for organizations to do. But it would be something that I think they're going to encounter real quickly when other teams need to access their data and are having problems.
And I definitely, go ahead.
Two thoughts come to mind, Seth, about what your comment there was. I think a lot of times organizations struggle in this area. There's two phases, I think, to every project. Phase one is turn it on, get it working, period. Phase two is typically come back, optimize, clean it up, make it better. And what I'm seeing right now is patterns of people are now using the Lakehouse with Dataflow's Gen 2. It's not the most efficient thing in the world. It's not the fastest thing, but what people are doing, they're just, I know how to use that tool. I'm just going to use it. I'm going to use that tool to build or land data in Bronze, do some simple transformations, maybe in Silver as a pipeline, loading data to Bronze. Notebooks, Dataflow's Gen 2 is picking up data from Bronze, doing some transformations to it, cleaning up in Silver, maybe making some gold layers as well in Dataflow's Gen 2. And now what I'm seeing is people are like, okay, we hear the internet saying notebooks are faster and better to work with. Let's try and use. So what they're doing now is they're saying, let's go look at my working data flow process, rebuilding it inside a notebook now and saying, oh, look, with 4 commands in a notebook, it's not as scary now for me to use notebooks to do the same thing. Oh, and by the way, it costs me less compute units to do the same transformations. So, I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what we're talking about, Lakehouse or non-Lakehouse, or this stuff's the same. You're bringing in data. You have records you need to update. You've got to, and you have either this slowly changing dimensions type stuff that you want to keep track of every single change, or you just say, I want the most recent value of all the change records in a table. This is a pattern that's just so common. It's just happening over and over and over again. And so the more you get your head around, look, this is not something brand new. It's doing the same stuff we've always been doing. At the end of the day, we're just trying to land the new records, update our tables to match whatever's in production or in the operational system. That's what we're doing. And it's the same pattern over and over again. One tool that I'm loving right now that I'm hoping that gets more support in pipelines is the copy job experience. Copy job is pretty dang sweet and does a lot of things for me that I don't have to worry about. And so I think Microsoft should do a better job of just saying, look, we're going to build a single activity that is the slowly changing dimension thing. I don't care how you do it, Microsoft. Do it as efficiently as you possibly can. We know semantic models like rows and keys and we want numbers as keys and columns, but we get GUIDs from our source systems. Like I really just want to come in and be like, look, Microsoft, here's the semantic model that I want. Here's the table that for customers. Here's the table in the fact table. I don't really care what you do. Just make the keys work. I don't really care what they are. I want these. You figure out the most optimal way to build and store those keys in your system And oh, by the way, I'm going to keep bringing in these, 10, 100,000 million records every day. These are new records. Okay, here's my existing table. Take these new records and this existing table and figure out what you need to update. I don't want to deal with any of it. We have to build so much code and logic and notebooks and patterns here. Like, this pattern is so consistent. Microsoft should just solve it. And I feel like they're trying to solve it with this thing called Copy Job, which is helpful. It works on top of the Lakehouse, but that's where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see some vision here. They're going to give us specific workloads or items that are going to give us that need. So anyways, I'm just very excited about this. That's kind of where we're going. I hope it's almost in that direction.
It's almost like you're saying that you would just want to pick the destination and get things off the ground and have your co-pilot take you there.
Ooh,
oh, snap.
Like the sweater he's wearing.
Like your sweatshirt.
So
Copilot told me to say it. I'm actually not even real. I'm AI generated. This is not even Mike Carl. I'm still sleeping in bed, actually.
Best AI yet. Best LLM we have got yet. So I'll do quickly closing thoughts because I know we're going on time. I think this is going to be a conversation we're going to have.
Yes.
I think it's going to involve, because one thing you made me spark, Mike, is I think we should revisit the second system effect, or that book about old computer systems, and talk about that in the world of Fabric. Mike, the biggest thing that you said that I think is going to be the real change here is, yes, the idea, the concept, and the ideals are the same with Fabric.
There's nothing changing here.
Except the people. And because now you have people who are coming from all different walks of life with different experiences, skills, and needs and behavior of what their job and their job role is. All of this that we've talked about, Medallion architecture, was reserved for a particular type of role at a particular type of company, or more in the data engineer. So that's where I'm intrigued to see where this goes. But that's really I think this is going to be a conversation we're going to continue to evolve and have a conversation on.
Any final thoughts for you, Seth?
No, I think, Fabric is one of those systems that's just you never know how somebody's going to use it. And just because we have the different workspaces, domains, it could be the same teams managing that, right? In terms of just where they're pulling in. So you have that Medallion architecture everywhere. And that is an ideal. You're probably going to run into the exact opposite of that, though, too, right? Like we sit back and we're like, it's still important. These frameworks are built for a purpose.
Yes.
We've opened up the doors for hardcore data engineering for folks.
Yep.
And hopefully organizations recognize that and do some due diligence, at least communicating the best practices or ways in which they want to see data entered into that system.
Yep.
Because I do foresee that you could easily get yourself into a state where one of these domains has completely useless data, right?
Yep.
And then you start over. And without that structure, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt.
I would have totally agree with that one. My only observation of this one I'll say is, look, in my doing the work around notebooks and Spark and all this Lakehouse stuff, it's super cool. I love it. I think it's going to be a game changer for many organizations. My only thought here is nothing's changed. It's the same the pattern of data engineering you've been doing in SSIS and SQL Server prior to this. It's the same stuff. We've just changed the medium slightly. So that's only my final thought is don't worry. We're not shifting the ground too much. The tech underneath the hood is slightly different, but the methodology, the planning, that still happens. It's still the same stuff. So don't get worried about it. Embrace it. Learn how to use it. And I think you're going to love it. I love developing in notebooks. I'm playing now with T-SQL notebooks, which are amazing. I don't like writing SQL in a single page code editor. I like having blocks of SQL. It's amazing. Anyways, that being said, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. This has been a super good conversation. Can't believe how fast it went. It went super fast. But thank you for your ears. We appreciate it. Our only ask to you as the audience is, please make sure you let other people know about the podcast, that you had some fun and you learned some interesting things here. Share it with somebody else. We appreciate that. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. and join the conversation on all of powerbi.tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.